All right, welcome back to the REBT Advocates on this 21st episode with Dr. Michael R. Adelstein and myself, Tommy Bateman. A buddy of mine decided to challenge me, and he's a therapist himself, and said, REBT does not work with borderline personality disorder. Now, I disagreed highly with him, and this is a more formal response to the otherwise grotesque response I gave him at the time.
Well, I've had the same thing where professionals say REBT doesn't work on this or that. And the first thing I notice is they find the word rational in rational motive behavior therapy as sort of a red flag, and they immediately say being rational doesn't work. So the problem is they're criticizing REBT and they don't really know what it is.
Yeah.
So first thing I do is I ask them, well, what's your impression of REBT?
Mm-hmm. And that was my experience too. My buddy, he said, what's the first letter? What does the R stand for? I said, rational. He said, exactly. And I went, well, that's, borderline personality is characterized by irrational behavior. And that's exactly what we're trying to work on. So yes, the nomenclature, the title is irrelevant. What we're trying to work on is irrational behavior, which leads to these emotional outbursts to begin with. So I found that first criticism or initial criticism wanting.
Right. Now, I am speaking with a psychiatrist now who's an addiction therapist, and he said, well, CBT doesn't work, and he's at least superficially familiar with it. And I think one of the problems in dealing with severe problems like borderline or addictions is the therapists miss the importance of teaching clients a way to identify and question and contradict their irrational beliefs, and do that on a regular basis, again and again and again and again. And it involves high frustration tolerance on the therapist's part, which they often don't have. They give up very easily and say, see, it doesn't work.
Yeah, and in fact, calling somebody borderline or labeling somebody as borderline to get some inside baseball with the mental health world is that's a pejorative. Oh, she's borderline as the day is long. That's a flaming borderline right there. And we kind of shrug, move on because we feel it's a hopeless case. I don't think so, but quite often they are the more difficult cases to deal with, but not quite hopeless. But yeah, it is a pejorative in the field.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean REBT can't handle it.
Right. Another issue there is I've had the therapists tell me, well, they know the right things. They tell themselves X, Y, or Z, and it doesn't work. So again, the issue is not just telling yourself what's reasonable and reminding yourself of a good perspective. It's doing it on a structured, organized way. And Tommy and I and other REBT therapists teach clients very specifically and carefully how to do it in a structured, organized way. One of the ways is a 3-minute exercise, or ABCDF, that Albert Ellis popularized, and give that as a homework assignment at the end of the sessions. Check it on the next session and show the client, A, you're serious about them doing it, and B, that this is the way we learn, through practice, repetition, and reinforcement. Unless they do it, they're not going to change their thinking.
And that's exactly right. I mean, the reason a lot of times people with borderline personality developed it to begin with is a habitual and routine pattern of practicing irrational thinking that led to this emotional instability to begin with. So what we do is we train through repetition and homework new ways of thinking, new, more rational ways of thinking, which is going to take a great deal of training and repetition, just like it was to develop the disorder to begin with. So we just prescribe the same repetition, but with more rational thinking.
Yeah. And along those lines, Tommy, this is what they've been training themselves in. Not only have they been training themselves to think irrationally, but all their life probably, but I remind themselves it's even worse than that. Not only have you been practicing unworkable thinking all your life, but you have your genetics working against you also, because the reason all humans have irrational beliefs is because we all have a genetic predisposition to escalate our strong preferences into demands. So that means even harder work, because your genetic predispositions are working against you.
Absolutely. And I've noticed a lot of other theories that attempt to work with borderline personality, once again, work on the symptoms. I've heard people characterize, and I think I said it earlier, characterize folks with this disorder as emotional burn victims, that if you touch them in the slightest way, just like a burn victim, they'll react very, very strongly. And so what these other theories do, such as dialectical behavioral therapy, they give them skills to work on soothing these this emotional volatility, but not giving them the skills to prevent that emotional instability to begin with. And that takes a new change of thinking, which REBT provides.
Right. Very good. Yes. Another reason, quote, REBT doesn't work, unquote, is because it's important to help the client specifically identify their irrational thinking that's causing their over-emoting and overreactions. And unless therapists are trained in doing this, they're not going to be very good at it. So they're kind of off in what the client is telling themselves that's really causing their problem. So I teach clients an easy way to identify their irrational beliefs, and that's the three main musts. A demand on oneself: I must do well and get approval or else I'm no good.
Mm-hmm.
You must treat me well and do my bidding or else you're no good, which is the main one with anger with
Mm-hmm.
borderlines. And then life must be fair, easy, and hassle-free, or else it's no good, and that often leads to impulsivity.
That's
So
right.
unless they're accurate in identifying the irrational beliefs in the first place, it's not going to be that helpful in the second place.
And it's been my experience where, a lot of disorders, anxiety or depression usually, or rage or irrational rage, often have one of the basic musts. But my experience is borderlines often have all three and all at once. So that's why it can be probably emotionally overwhelming for those folks from time to time.
Okay, very good. Well, we have more reasons why people think REBT doesn't work. These are some of the main ones. So we might continue this at a later podcast. Thanks very much, Tommy.
Thank you, Michael. Bye now.
Bye.